So hi guys, good evening once again. So we are in day two of Connect World with ESP workshop, hands-on workshop. Uh, so we have today here Vinay. So Vinay will be taking continuing the session about he will be more explaining about the ESP32 and how it can be programmed and what and all things you can experiment or you can work with ESP32 and all. So hope to have a good session today also. And I'm inviting Vinay to take up and continue the workshop. Hi Vinay.
Yeah, hi Sahan. Thanks for giving us a brief about the workshop. So this is the second day of the workshop that we have on Connect the World with ESP. We are specifically focusing on ESP32 microcontrollers in this experiment. Like we saw yesterday on the first session, we had topics which were very focused on getting the ESP32 up. We had an introduction of the ESP32, and we did a few experiments with a sensor on the ESP32. Today's workshop is going to be a step further into ESP32 and how we can connect or how we can build IoT devices for our specific projects. So I think we will start the session and let us look at a few topics that we have. So my name is Vinay Sridhar. I am an entrepreneur and I am a founder of iMove Motion Tech, which is a medical devices company. I am taking the training for LI2 and Cisco Thinkubator over here. And let us see, we finished the first session, which was on 26th July. We're today going to look at socket programming and firmware update over the air. Okay, so let us start with the content for today. The contents for today is essentially we're looking at what are servers, what are the types of different servers that are specifically used with respect to the electronic systems world. Then we'll see what a socket programming is and how a connection is made between two different nodes and how they are made to communicate. Then you see a very interesting topic, which is called the ThingsBoard UI. The ThingsBoard is a UI or a GUI, a graphical user interface, which is already pre-built for us to perform multiple activities. Say, for example, you want to visualize some data. You have a few different sensors which you want to connect and stream the data to the internet, to the cloud, where anyone can see it. This platform, the ThingsBoard platform, is a very unique platform where we will be walking you through the basics of ThingsBoard, but it has the capabilities where you can even buy it, you can even download it and put it on your own AWS server and then make it work. Okay, so there we will see an experiment, which is the DHT sensor experiment. Then we will then move on to over-the-air programming. That is also a very interesting topic, and I'll show you a few applications which would essentially be of the real world where OTA is very much needed and very much useful. Then in the end, we will go through a small module called the INMP 441 audio sensor interface, where the INMP 441 is a MEMS microphone where you can record the data, and then I will show you what further we can do. Though this is going to be our experiment for today, where we're looking at people to try and do this experiment on their own once you get access to this particular hardware. Okay, so let us dive into the first topic for today, which is server communication. So as the name server suggests, is that a server is a hardware or a software that provides functionality or provides features to the client. Okay, so the servers provide services, if you have to say in a very technical term, the servers provide services to clients for performing computational activity. So you see over here, right? Say, for example, we are doing a Google search. What happens? We open our internet browser, then we search some ABC or XYZ, whatever we want to search. We search for that, and it goes through the internet, reaches the Google servers, gets back a response, and we see it on the browsers that we have. Yesterday, we saw a bit of the web browser. Today, we will see on how we can use servers and what are the different types of servers that are there. There might be a lot of servers, different types, but we will focus on servers which are very relatable to an electronic device which we have with us, which is the ESP32. Okay, so the types of servers that we're looking at today is an application server, a computing server, a file exchange server where files can be transferred from one system to the other system. A mail server is what we generally use for our emails, right? So how this mail server is essentially moving information from one person to the other person, and a web server, that is what we saw yesterday. So these are the types of different servers which are there. The application server and the computing server we will see in a bit of detail, but essentially when we want to run a particular application which is not running in your computer, but you're accessing that application from a remote system, that system will be running an application server. A computing server, say for example, I need to do a very heavy work. Say for example, I will take an example of PCB CAD design. Right. So PCB CAD design, a typical industry grade PCB CAD design software like Altium or OrCAD will need massive amounts of computational power because it is very heavy. It does a lot of 3D rendering. It does a lot of other activities of routing, placement and things like that. So that may not be supported by your computer over here. So what I will do is I will have a main server where multiple people like me can access that server, use the processing power of that particular server over there, and see the results on my computer over here. Right? So that is essentially a computing server. Okay, so let's start off with what is an application server. An application server is a server that hosts web applications. It might be web or it might be a desktop application. Okay, so the application server frameworks are used to build application servers. So specifically, if you have a particular application running externally, say for example, it is monitoring some information, processing that data and storing it over there. And that application, what they will provide is something called APIs, right? So APIs are nothing but commands that you can use to communicate to that particular application server. So through these APIs, you can send requests to those application servers from which you can get back the information to your own computer. Okay, so application servers consist of web server connectors. It consists of computer programming languages like Python, Ruby, Java, etc. It consists of runtime libraries. It also has database connectors. So say, for example, there is an application running, and that requires a lot of storage of data or information, right? So that would need an database, through which, the database connectors are through which they are connected to a particular application. And the administration code needed to deploy, configure, manage, and connect these applications on a web host, right? So you might need authentication, you might need privacy, you might need security. So all those kind of functionalities where you need to deploy, configure, manage these components on a web host, all of these are part of an application server. Okay, so let's move on. I'm not going very deep into what application servers are, but just to teach you and understand, make you understand the very basic concepts of an application server. So let's move on to a computing server. A computing server is a server which is lifting heavy weight, right? So shares a vast amount of computing resources. Say, for example, it has a lot of storage space, it has a lot of memory, it has a lot of processing power, and that is doing a lot of heavy lifting for you, then that server is called a computing server. So any computer program that needs more CPU power and more RAM than a personal computer can probably afford is a computing server. And for me to carry, say, for example, a computing server like my laptop, it wouldn't be possible. I wouldn't be able to move it very easily like a laptop. But if I need that kind of processing power, what I will do is I will connect my computer to that computing server through internet protocols, right? And that will help me to do the processing on my computer as well. So I'm sharing the resources of what the server can offer. Okay. Excuse me. The client must be a networked computer. That specifically means that I need to be connected to that particular remote server. So what does a computing server consist of? Computing servers consist of computer sharing resources like CPU, like RAM, what your PC, what your personal computer does not have. Okay, it serves needs for other computers. Say, for example, like I told you, if I have to take an example of movie editing or visual effects in a movie, right? So that might not be possible very fast on my system, which I have over here. But if there is a server which is lying somewhere else, which has massive amount of power, massive amount of resources that can be used, it will be much faster for me. That's why we use remote systems, which essentially are called servers. So examples of computing servers may be home media servers and printer servers. Okay. Next comes something called a mail server. Okay, so this is very interesting because we exchange emails on a very daily basis, right? So let us understand on how this mail server essentially works. So clients are typically senders and receivers. So say, for example, I want to send an email to you, right? So I'm a client and you are also a client, where I'm the sender and you're the receiver, right? So a message transfer agent receives the mail from either of the MTA, right? And a mail submission agent is there and a mail user agent is there. So essentially a message is received from one end. If you see on the left, it goes into a mail user agent, right? And through simple mail transfer protocol, SMTP, I'm sure you'd have heard about these names, SMTP. So through simple mail transfer protocols, it moves to a MTA, where from the MTA, it goes to something called an MDA, and it goes directly to specifically the end user or the receiver as a client through MUA, which is another mail user agent. So essentially what happens in the MTA and the MDA is where the mail server is located. Okay, so this is how the emails are delivered from one person to the other person. Okay, so that was a brief into the types of servers that we have. Okay, there are a lot of servers, but essentially let us look into what servers are possible on the ESP32. Why I have discussed only application server, computing server, and mail server is that this ESP32 has very limited space to run a server application. So web server is essentially what this device can handle. Anything more, like you want to have a computer connecting to an ESP32, and like I told you, I cannot run that CAD software or the PCB design software on an ESP32, right? So that's why I am showing you very basic examples of what is a server. Okay, so now let's move on to something called socket programming. Okay, so socket programming is nothing but a way of connecting two nodes or two clients with each other. So the process of how you can connect two servers, to one server and one client to each other, or one server to multiple clients in a particular manner is called socket programming. Okay, so this is a very basic definition of socket programming, where one socket or node listens to a particular port, right? So this word port is very necessary and important of an IP address. So the IP address also has a specific port where the client can listen to the server. The other creates the connection between the nodes, right? So one listens to the node and the other creates the connection between the nodes. Okay, so there are, if you see on the right side, this is how a typical server and a client socket connection happens. So both have sockets. Okay. So then you first open the socket in the server and you set the socket, and then you bind the socket and you uh, wait for the IP address to connect to it. From the client, it this directly goes and sees what is the IP address that it needs to connect to or it needs to broadcast to, and it automatically connects to that particular socket of the server. Then what happens is that the server accepts, sends and receives an acknowledgement where the client also understands that, okay, now it has been connected. So the acknowledgement of the send and receive acknowledgement message is a very important part, which shows that a socket is connected, or a server and a client have been connected. Okay, so a socket provides access to TCP IP, which is the transport protocols, or how communication happens with each other. So if you remember the OSI models, TCP IP comes in the transport protocols, right? So there are three types of sockets. There is a stream socket, which has a lot of streaming of information, which we essentially use, which is the TCP protocol. We have the datagram socket, which is not a one-way communication, but essentially is a very fast way of communication without an acknowledgement. We will see that on how it happens. And there is a raw socket, which provides access to internet control messaging protocol. Here is where we get to know whether our networks are connected to the internet. So say, for example, my router is essentially down at my house, right? So there is, if I go to networks and troubleshooting, right, here is where the ICMP plays a big role, where I send a message, and if it does not if it is not received at the server, and if I do not get an acknowledgement, that protocol of transport of the communication is the internet control messaging protocol, ICMP. Okay, so now let's move into what is TCP communication or TCP based programming. Okay, so TCP is nothing but transmission control protocol. Okay, so if you see on the right side, there is a working of the transmission control protocol, that is the TCP protocol. So you have a client which is actively open. It sends a synchronization segment. Once it sends a request, which is a synchronization segment, to the server sends a sync plus acknowledgement segment saying that, okay, I am open to be connected. And then once it is connected, the client says another acknowledgement which says that, okay, I have received this message of saying that you are open and I can connect to you, right? So this type of double handshaking. So if you know the word handshaking is very specific over here, where you are making sure that the other person has actually got the information that one of the person has sent. Okay, so while IP handles the actual delivery of the data, the IP address, the TCP keeps track of these particular segments of the synchronization segment and the acknowledgement segment. So what does the TCP essentially solve? Right. So if you implement a TCP protocol, which is very much in the low level, we do not need to implement it because there is a lot of research going on and people are working on it to make this a standard, and it is already a very big standard, and you have example codes for the same, right? So what TCP solves is that TCP solves problems like packet loss, right? If there is a packet loss, if I do not get a complete acknowledgement, I know that there is a packet loss, or the server understands that there is a packet loss. If the packets are out of order, say for example, the server wanted to send 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that particular string of data to the client, and if I receive the data as 1, 2, 4, 5, right? If I miss something out, if it's out of order, right? So there is a TCP protocol which gets the acknowledgement and understands that this data what is being received is not correct. So it solves the problems of packet loss. It solves problems of out of order packets. It removes duplicate packets. It solves the problem of duplicate packets. Also, it solves problems of corrupted packets. Okay, so the TCP is used in a place where you need data accuracy and the number of data which is being received. It is not too fast. It's because it needs time for all the segments to be completed from the client to the server and back to the client, right? So you will use it in a way in an area or in an application which is very specific, that you need data to be correct, efficacy of the data, right? So the next topic we have over here is UDP, which is a user datagram protocol. This is used where you need a very low latency. Low latency meaning it should communicate in a blink of a second. It should communicate in a flash, right? And it is less tolerating. So it's okay if you miss a few data. Say, for example, I am continuously monitoring the light sensor. So if I miss even a packet, in the next packet, I'll make up for it because I'm sending so much of data, right? But if you're actually measuring what is the electricity and you don't want to miss even a single packet, TCP/IP is where it is used. But if you want continuous data which has very low latency and is less tolerating, then you can use a UDP based programming or UDP protocol for your communication. So the UDP is essentially called a connectionless communication protocol, right? So if you see on the bottom right, there is an explanation of TCP versus UDP communication. So in the TCP handshake, which sends a sync segment, then you get a sync acknowledgement segment, and then again you from the sender to the receiver you get another acknowledgement signal. But in the UDP protocol, from the receiver, you just get one request and you continuously give responses from the sender to the receiver. Excuse me. So this is called UDP protocol or a connectionless communication protocol. So what is the advantages of a UDP protocol, right? So UDP communication has very small packet size. It is about less than 60% of what the TCP packet size is. UDP header is only 20 bytes, but a TCP header is 80 bytes. Okay, so UDP is a connectionless protocol, no connection before sending out data, more control of when the data is being sent out. Okay, so if you do not have any sync which is required from the receiver back to the sender needs to continuously wait for this sync until he gets that he will not send the next packet, right? So that makes it a slower protocol compared to UDP, where there is only one request and continuously you are feeding in responses from the sender to the receiver. Yeah, I hope that was clear where we are seeing UDP and TCP, though we are not doing a comparative experiment to study TCP/IP and UDP here, but with respect to an ESP32 that I have over here, we will be using or we will be testing how I can communicate from my computer over here, my PC, to this ESP32 over UDP. Okay, so let's open up our browser. So if you have a Windows system, you can always use a Windows system. Okay. Let me just open a new tab. Yeah. I will here search for packet sender client, right? So packet sender client is a free utility. A packet sender client is a free utility which can be used for Windows, for an Apple machine or a Linux machine. So you would need to download this packet sender application. I already have this packet sender application downloaded over here. Please install the packet sender and we'll see how we can send data from our computer over UDP or TCP/IP to your ESP32. Okay, so I hope this is clear. Once we have downloaded it, you will not get these logs. You could clear these logs if required, but essentially we need to understand what is the code that needs to be put in to the ESP32. Okay, so in this code for the ESP32, you would need to add in your credentials of your router. you would need to include two libraries, which is wi-fi.h and async udp.h. Async udp.h, in the later versions of Arduino, it comes pre-installed, but if it's not, please install this async udp header file into this particular application, which is the Arduino. Now let us consider the LED, which is on the onboard LED, which is on GPIO number 2. Let's call the async UDP function as UDP and begin this particular experiment. Here it understands that here is, if you remember from yesterday's experiments, here is where we were able to connect to an access point, which is the router over here, and we are listening to the port called 1234. You could change the port over here and change it over there as well, but for now I have kept the port as 1234. So this is hosting the server where it is basically communicating from the laptop to this, and it is listening to the port 1234. So you can have multiple devices communicating on multiple of these ports so that you can identify from which device the particular function or the action has taken place. Okay, so you're listening to port number 1234. You need to understand this. We start and we print the particular data on the Arduino over here. Okay, and what we are doing in Arduino is that once you've received the packet, you are seeing if the packet is ZAP. I'm just giving an example. You could write whatever you want. You turn on, you print a message called welcome, and you turn off the LED. Okay, you print a message called welcome and you turn off the LED. If the message is VYP, it will say, hi, my name is Vinay. That means that that is the message which is coming in from an external device into the ESP, and it will turn on the LED. Okay, so then it will give packets and wait. If there is no broadcast, it will say anyone here. Okay, so let's run this particular example. Let's upload this program onto the ESP32. Make sure that all your settings for the ESP32 where your COM port, your communication ports have been selected correctly. Okay, and let's wait for this application to be loaded onto the ESP32. You would need to continue the boot sequence like I told you yesterday. You need to press down the boot button and then press the reset button once. Once it completes loading, it says done uploading, and let's open up the serial monitor to see what is happening. Make sure that the baud rate over here and the baud rate over on your COM port are the same. Okay, let's press the reset button. It tries to connect to this particular IP address. So now I know that this is the IP address of this particular device, and it is listening on port number 1234. Okay, so now let us go back to the packet sender. Let me open up this COM port as well so that it is easier for us to see. Okay, over here I am trying to send a packet as a message. Okay, I am trying to send a packet. So let's type in the IP address over here, 192.168.1.5. Okay, the port is 1234. And the protocol over here, you can choose TCP/IP or UDP. Let me just choose UDP. And if you remember, if I type in ZAP over here, I should get a message on my Arduino which says welcome. Okay, so let me just say ZAP over here and send this message. If you see over here on the serial monitor of Arduino, I am getting a message from this particular device, okay, which my computer, which is 192.168.1.117, and it is received on this particular device on the ESP32 on the port number 1234. It has the length of 3. The data is ZAP. All this information is actually coming, and once it gets the message, it says welcome. So you see over here, even the LED is off and it's all performed well. So let's see what happens when we type VYP. Okay, so VYP is the other message that we wanted to send. Let's send the message from the computer. And you see over here, the LED is turned on and you get a message. Hi, my name is Vinay. Okay, let me type in Zap again and send it, and you can see the LED go off. Right, so this is an experiment where my device need not be connected over here as well. It might be connected to a wall socket, right? So you can connect it, and from this packet sender, you will be able to send any packet and pass any packet on this particular device. Okay, so this is the UDP communication, which essentially happens between my laptop over here and the ESP32. Okay, so I hope you've got a basic idea of this experiment. Essentially, you would need this application called Packet Sender, which sends the packet from this particular machine, which is my computer, to any other machine with an IP address and on a particular port, excuse me, and that can be received from the ESP32. So that was the experiment for UDP. I hope you've understood. If you've not, please send me a message so that I can clear any doubts. Yeah, just give me a moment. I will be back. Yeah, I think there are a few questions over here that I would like to answer from Abhishek Abhay saying, how is the ESP connected to the PC? Right now it is connected. Let me just turn on the video. Right now it is connected through a USB cable into my PC. Though it need not be connected, it just needs to be in the vicinity of my access point, which is my router that I have. Right. So now it is connected. Maybe if I disconnect it, and if I connect it, I won't get those logs, but I will still get the message saying that it is. I will get the LED indication if I send the particular message over here through the packet sender. Okay. The other question from Piyush, definitely you will be getting these codes packaged and with the PPT so that you can get access to this. Also, the video, the recorded video will be put onto your training groups. Yeah, I hope I answered the question by Abhay. Yeah. How is it connected to the PC? I mean, how it communicates? Yes. So right now it has a socket. The PC has a socket. This also has a socket. And through UDP, it is communicating from my PC into the ESP32. So this is a protocol where you saw in the packet sender. I'm selecting the UDP protocol and I'm sending a packet from that packet sender into this ESP32 because I know the IP address of this ESP32. And based on the IP address and the packet I sent, I'm performing a particular activity. I'm putting in a message saying welcome, or I'm turning on and turning off the LED on the ESP32. I hope that was a little better. So I think Purnima has asked a question saying that how can we connect different ESP boards? Say, for example, you have one particular server, which is your access point that I'm connecting to. All these devices can essentially need not be connected to my PC, right? It can essentially be connected to a wall socket, and it is connected to your access point where I can get the IP address. So if I have IP addresses of multiple ESP32s, I will be able to communicate from this packet sender to each and every specific ESP32 connected around me. Right? So it need not be connected to your computer because I need to see these data logs or the serial monitor. That is why I'm connecting it to the PC. Otherwise, I can connect it to a wall socket and still do the same experiment where I can control a particular function based on the message that I'm sending. So I send VYP and this, what do you say, the LED turned on, right? So similarly, you can send motor on. And if a motor is connected to this ESP32 and this ESP32 is connected to the same access point, and I get to know the IP address, I will be able to send a message to this particular device. Okay, so I think Piyush has asked a question. Is UART communication done through ESP32 or PC? It can be done through both. From the PC, it is communicating over USB, right? And on this particular board, it has a USB to UART communicator where the communication happens. Similarly, from the module, which is over here, it communicates over UART, and there is a module called CP2102, which converts this UART to USB and then comes back into the computer. Right? So the essentially the messages that you were seeing were the messages from the ESP32, which was welcome, hi, this is Vinay, and things like that. That was the messages seen from the ESP32 and not from the computer. The computer was just sending out the packet in the UDP using the UDP protocol. Okay, so I think we could move on. If you have any questions, we will still take up those questions in the end. I'm sorry, there was a big question. Abhishek, if we could take up these questions in the end, it will be great. I will definitely come back to your question. Yeah, thanks. Let's move into the experiment of ThingsBoard, right? So like I told you, ThingsBoard is a UI based application. So you could call this essentially an application server where it is actually sitting in someone else's computer and you're able to send in data to that specific computer and you are able to visualize the data over that. Okay, so the ThingsBoard is an application where you can download into your computer and host it on your own server as well. But let's right now open up this web page called demo.thingsboard.io. I have it opened over here, right? And I have logged in using my credentials. You will also be able to log in using your specific credentials. Okay, so once you've logged in and created an account in thingsboard.io website, let us go to Arduino and install the libraries which are necessary. Okay, so the libraries which are necessary, you can go to include library, manage library. And in manage library, you would need to install the ThingsBoard library. You would need to install the PubSub client by Kevin O'Leary. Yeah, let me just open these up so that you'll be able to see. Okay, so it is updating the list of libraries which are essentially present. So if you type ThingsBoard over here, it will open up all the libraries which are specific to ThingsBoard. You see that it is installed. Please install the latest version. I have installed the latest version of ThingsBoard itself. After you install ThingsBoard, you would need to install PubSub client. Sorry, PubSub client. So this PubSub client is essentially a publish and a subscribe client, which is the protocol which is used. Which are the functions which are used in the MQTT protocol or the Mosquitto protocol. MQTT protocol, maybe some other day or some other workshop, you'll be going through MQTT. So in this, you would need to install the pub sub client by Nick O'Leary, which is 2.8, version 2.8 or higher, where the ESP32 essentially works. After you install this, you need to install Arduino HTTP client. So you're actually sending HTTP requests from this particular device, which is the ESP32, okay, into the UI, which is the ThingsBoard UI. Okay, so I've installed the version over here. And the last version is last library you need to install is Arduino JSON, which is the package or the library which is used to form the particular payload, right? So there is a particular payload that the ThingsBoard accepts. And for that, you need Arduino JSON because you need a JSON format to send the data from the ESP32 into the ThingsBoard application. Okay, so once you've done that, what you need to do is that you need to put the Wi-Fi name and your Wi-Fi credentials and password. Okay, here is a very important thing is a token. A token is nothing but an authentication element. Yesterday, I think we saw on how tokens are used in Blink or the mobile phone app, which was BLYNK. Even in ESP32, you have a specific token over here. So now you would need to go back to the ThingsBoard application. Okay, because this is a demo account, there are already devices which are created over here. I have created a ESP32 test device, but let us delete this device and create a new device for this particular experiment. Okay, so there is an add device option over here. You can go to add device. You can give the name of the device as ESP test or whatever name that you want. Okay, so it gives you a default profile. If you have a different profile, I mean, for now it will not matter. Then we need to add the credentials for this particular device. So the credential type is an access token. So anyone who has this access token, say for example, not only your friends might be having some other data or some other sensors, but if they connect to this particular access token, they will be able to visualize the data on a single platform. So say for example, you have 5 friends and 5 different friends are measuring temperature. One guy is measuring humidity, someone else is measuring soil moisture, etc. All the 5 can essentially send it to one particular dashboard through sitting anywhere across the world, right? And the token over here is the most important thing over here. So ESP32.TQB. So maybe in your TQB incubator labs, you might be 4 of y'all who want to send all the data to one dashboard. This is the way to do it. So you need to keep a common token across all the devices and it will send data to this particular device. Then you can add this device over here, and there is an ESP test device which has popped up over here. Okay, let me click on this device and see what happens over here. You can copy your access token. You can always change your access token over here. Okay, you want to delete the device, you can delete the device. You have something called attributes, the client attributes. You have latest telemetry. Telemetry is where you are communicating over MQTT protocol into this particular UI or the dashboard. This is the back end of the dashboard for us at the moment. So all the data that you send from the ESP32 will pop up over here. You could also generate alarms. Say for example, the temperature is too high. You can generate alarms and you can create them on the fly over here. You can create events, you can send messages, you can send emails. All those things are possible. And you also have audit logs where you can log where you have, say for example, I've changed my credentials, so you can identify over here that I have changed my credentials of this device. Okay, so this is essentially creating the device. Now I know what is the access token, so I go back to ThingsBoard, I mean Arduino IDE, and I put my access token over here. Please make sure that if you want your data to be secure, your access token needs to be common for, I mean, it should be very specific and secret to you, right? So if you are using the demo account of ThingsBoard, you can use this address, or if you want to download this ThingsBoard and host it on your AWS server or anything like that, you'll have an IP address or a username like a website a URL. You can put that URL over here, and essentially here is an example where I will be using the DHT sensor and sending data over JSON. So this is the particular format. I wanted to show you the format in which the communication happens. So you have a set value, you have a get value, and you have a get GPIO status. So all these values are essentially being read from the DHT sensor and being sent to the ThingsBoard server. Okay. And this is how you send the data. I mean, this is only a particular API which is used from the ThingsBoard library, which is present on the Arduino IDE, and tb.send telemetry float data. It will send float data to your particular server. Okay, so you can write a very basic example. This is a very complicated example. Maybe we will share with you a basic example for your particular application. So once you've done and programmed this ESP32, okay, you can just log in to your ThingsBoard again and open up the device, and in the latest telemetry, because right now I do not have the DHT sensor, you will not be seeing any data coming in over here, but in the latest telemetry, you will essentially get the data of the humidity and the temperature. Okay, so this is a basic example of using ThingsBoard as a backend device where you are able to send data from multiple ESP32s to one particular central dashboard. Okay, when I say dashboard, I still haven't come to the dashboard part. Okay, so the dashboard is essentially the dashboards over here. You could always create new dashboards. So there is a dashboard which is already created over here. Let us see what this dashboard essentially does. So this dashboard has the humidity values. It also has the temperature values, and you also have a graph which is essentially updating every 5 seconds. You see over here, every 5 seconds, there is an update of the data which is happening. Right now, there is no information coming, but if you are able to send information to this particular latest telemetry value, it will automatically pop up over here. Okay, so the why it is called a dashboard is that there are a lot of widgets that you could use. Okay, so let's go to add new widget, and we could create a new widget. So there are different kinds of widgets which are available. Let me move this to the side. There is an alarm widget. It would turn different colors. So you could use alarm widgets. You could use analog gauges. Say, for example, you are measuring what is the pressure of a system in a gas pipeline. So you could always use an analog gauge. Then you could have cards, which is essentially telling you what is the table. I mean, it would form tables to give you information. There are control widgets where you want to switch on and switch off the LED. You can actually use these control widgets. Yeah. Yeah. Hi, Amrita, you wanted to say something? Okay, I think it was by mistake. So let us just continue with the next part, which is we have digital gauges. You saw that there is a digital gauge on the left side over here. You have a lot of these widgets which you could use essentially for your particular application. So this is a free application which you could essentially use to build your visualization or the front end after creating the back end of the dashboard in the devices tab. Okay, so this is the example of ThingsBoard that no problem, Amrita, it's okay. So this is the example of Thingsboard and what are the widgets which are essentially present. Okay, so let's move on from Thingsboard to over-the-air programming or OTA, which is a very interesting concept. Okay, so before I start off with OTA, I would like to tell you a small example of where an OTA would have been essentially useful. Okay, so it is a personal story of mine where we had built a water monitoring system, right? So a water monitoring system was monitoring the quality and the quantity of water. It had a GSM module which was transmitting data to Thingsboard specifically. I think I do not have that up, but I would have shown you that particular demo that was present with me. But essentially, there were devices going across India. There were more than 25, 30 devices in different states, and we were in the trial stage, right? So what happened was when we had built that device, we had not thought about the OTA option, where we were trying to test and understand how and where it would actually function. Okay, but that was a mistake we essentially did. So once the device had gone to Rajasthan and one device had gone to Northeast, right? And there was a bug. And what can I do over there? There are no engineers. I mean, from my end, there were no engineers. There were no people to take care and update some codes into that. And I couldn't connect to that device, and it was a big mess, right? So there have been companies who have lost and shut down their companies because they were not able to send servicemen to the ground to fix the issue, right? So imagine you have a mobile phone, right? So every time there is a software update, essentially what would have been done if there was no OTA is that you would have to take it to the nearest mobile phone shop or take it to your computer, connect it, download that software, and automatically uploads, right? It would upgrade the software, and that would be a very tedious task. I think initially when the mobile phones also came, that there was a time where we would need to go to a mobile shop and then we would need to get our mobiles upgraded. Right now it is very seamless overnight. You just click on OK, one single tap of a button and everything just gets uploaded and upgraded onto your mobile phone. Right? So OTA is a very, very important concept, at least according to me, in devices which are going away from you, right? So when you are building projects where you need to deploy away from you and you do not have access, you definitely need the OTA functionality over here. Okay. So over the air programming is OTA. OTA is OTA update is a process of loading a new firmware to the ESP32 board using a Wi-Fi connection rather than a serial connection. Say, for example, I am not connected. I do not have a connection directly to my PC from this, right? Then how do I program this, right? So if there was already OTA present, I would never need a physical connection. Maybe I am using this to control my geyser in my house, right? So if I have to change the code for the geyser, I would need to physically go and connect it and things like that. But if I did not have a way of physically connecting to this ESP32 over there, what would I do? Right? It would just go for waste, right? So over the air updates essentially give you a lot of flexibility in terms of adding new features. So the advantages of OTA is essentially you can add new features to your device sitting remotely, right? You can update or rectify bugs. You could do remote maintenance of a particular device. And if you want to scale a device, say for example, like I told you an example of the water quality system, if now I ship a system somewhere to Mumbai or to Goa or somewhere else, right? And how do I program it there? How do I understand the programming over there? So if I had a way where I could program it over the air, right? And I can scale these devices. I can make 10 more devices just pop up and get provisioned over there. That would be a very big advantage. And OTA is the way to do it, right? So you see the picture over here where you have a device management system. You have an OTA which is released into the cloud, and all the devices which are there at the end are listening to this cloud device and updating their software accordingly. So you could update a logistics truck with your software. You could have a new machine and put a new software in that. You could have a smart petrol bunk station where a new update could automatically come and sit onto that system. And you could do it for hundreds and hundreds of devices with just a click of a button, right? So one of the easiest way, I would take an example of Elegant OTA, which is a library or a group which has created this particular application where they take the Arduino code, they convert, I mean, you need to update the binary code into this particular device, into this particular web server. And from this web server, it communicates to the ESP32 to update the firmware into the system. So you could update either your firmware or you could actually update something called your file system. So in this demonstration that we will be showing you a basic OTA functionality of the system. Okay, so let us see what is the experiment of OTA. Okay, so for OTA, you would need the library called the Wi-Fi library, the Wi-Fi client, the web server. So there is a web server which is created. I think yesterday we saw how web servers are created. There is a web server created and there is a DNS ESP mobile DNS which is created. Okay, and we have credentials, which is my SSID and password. So still the device is connected to the access point. Okay, so here is the HTML form. So you see over here, there is this code is essentially HTML code. So you could put in your HTML code. If you have a way of creating a login page, you could put that page over here and understand how to receive the login. So once it receives the login, it will open up the next page, which essentially gets the data. You see over here, there is a posting of the data and it submits or updates the value. So if I put a binary file into that particular choice, it will update that binary file into the ESP32 that we have over here. So going deeper into, say for example, let me open up Paint and tell you what essentially happens in an OTA or what devices are essentially doing. Okay, so this is a very basic understanding. Please do not take this picture into consideration too much. So now I have a CPU and I have an ESP32, right? So I have the ESP32 now, which looks bigger than your CPU, but essentially let's leave it at this. Okay, so the ESP32 has particular parts of this device. Okay, so there are parts which essentially is your running firmware, running application, okay, and your other part which is your backup. So how these embedded devices essentially work is that now when I'm actually sending an OTA request from the CPU through the internet, of course, through the web server that I have in the middle, I have a web server over here. So when I send the request over here, what happens is that from the running application, this is moved on to the backup application. Okay, this means to say that the previous version is essentially taken as a backup. Now the firmware or the .bin file, okay, the .bin file or the binary file over here comes and sits into the space where you have the running application. So it gets uploaded from the CPU through the web server or the cloud that we have over here and moves into the running application. So in the middle, if there is any chance where the power goes off, what this does is that it understands that the completion of this binary file transfer is not done. It rejects the whole application and transfers the backup application into the running application. Okay, so this feature is currently present in most of the microcontrollers, because you do not want to lose information, or if you lose power during this particular transfer, it should not get corrupted. Okay, so this is basically how the OTA function happens. You would need to connect to the ESP. I mean, you would need to connect to the access point, which is my router, and then upload the file from here into the ESP32. Let's wait for the ESP32 to upload this code. You would need to consider the same boot sequence. Once you have completed the boot sequence, it starts uploading, and once the upload happens, it says done uploading. Let's go to our serial monitor and reset the ESP32. Once it resets the ESP32, so there is an IP address which this ESP32 is connected. I mean, it receives an IP address from the access point that we have. So let us open, because this is now running a web server, there will be a web page also to be accessed in this device. So let's go to 192.168.1.5. That was the IP address. Okay, now I have a login into this particular device's web servers. Okay, so I've created a login page, excuse me, and the username and password is admin and admin. Okay, so now I'm able to access this particular server, the web server on the ESP32. Essentially, if you don't want a physical connection, you would need to connect it in this particular manner. Okay, so now you have a web server where I have a file that needs to be updated. Here I cannot give an INO file because it needs to go into the kernel or the level of the binary program, right? So I need to update a .binary file, a .bin file, or a .hex file. So for that, what I'll do over here, now you see that the LED is essentially turned off. Now I will try to upload a program over the air where I can turn on the LED. So here is the code for the LED. Please make sure that you still need to put the web server again. Otherwise, the web server will go, and then if you update a code where it is only a blinky code, again, you will not be able to access it over the internet, right? So you still need to put the same web server code, but add in the part of the LED over here. So you see over here, there is an LED part over here with a delay of 1 second. Okay, so let's here you would need not upload this code directly, because I am imagining that this device is not connected to my PC, right? So now what I need to do is I need to take the binary file. So to take the binary file, I would need to go to Sketch, right? And export compiled binary. Sketch and export compiled binary. So I want the .binary file. The shortcut is Ctrl-Alt-S. So this binary file gets compiled and is placed into the folder where this particular program is saved. Okay, to see where it is saved, I can go to show sketch folder. So I have done compilation and the binary has been completely placed into the particular folder. I go to show sketch folder. If I see the sketch folder, there is a program which is LED web update.ino esp.bin. Okay, so this binary file is essentially what I need to put into that particular web server. So I understand that it is in PC, documents, Arduino, and LED web update. Okay, so I go back to my web server over here, and let me choose the file over here. I'm already in that particular location, and this is the file that I want. It is 614, so I just got the binary file. The binary file and click on update. So what should happen here is that once the complete progress is done, the LED on the Arduino should start blinking. Okay, you will see over here that once the progress is completed, the LED will start blinking and I will still have access to this particular device. So you see over here, I have not done anything, but the LED has started to blink. Okay, so let us see if you can even play around with the LED sequence. Maybe it is for you to validate or to see if it works with a shorter delay or a longer delay, or try to connect instead of the LED, connect a motor and see that if you can upload an OTA firmware into this device, right? So now I just showed you how I can upload a program without connecting it or without using the upload button over here. Okay, so that was the experiment of OTA. I hope you all have understood the example of the OTA. Okay, so this PPT, the credentials and the codes will be shared with you so that you can do this experiment on your own as well. Okay. Now comes to the last part, which is your DIY playground. The DIY playground is using an INMP 441 audio experiment. So this module is a MEMS audio microphone, which is essentially a mic. So you see over here, there is a golden colored device. This golden colored small chip over here is essentially a microphone, which is a mechanical electro material device, which is your MEMS device essentially, which reads the data and sends the data over a protocol which is called I2S. So we will see later what is the protocol of I2S in the coming workshops. But essentially, this is the hardware connection where the INMP device needs to be connected to your ESP32 module, where the SCK of the INMP module should be connected to pin number the GPIO D2 on the ESP32. Okay, the write select should be connected to pin number 15. The SD should be connected to 13. The left or right selection, for now we can leave it unconnected because we do not go into the depth. And the ground should be connected to the ground of the ESP32, and the VDD, this takes in only 3.3 volts. So please make sure that it is connected to the 3.3 volts source. So what happens in this example is that you will get a graph, which is an analog signal, which is not an analog signal, it's an I2S signal, but which looks like a signal which comes as a particular waveform. Okay, so we've taken this screenshot and we've shown you what is the kind of signal which comes from this INMP 441 example. So we would like you to try to do this experiment. I know that you might not have access to this INMP module, but it's nice that if you could try this, because I'm telling you that this MEMS microphone will make a lot of difference in building IoT systems. Okay, so people, if I have to go and go into the depth of why audio applications would be much better, people really do not have the time to type, the time to put in input through hand, or not able to type in the input at the moment. So imagine the application of a Siri, right? So you have a Siri or you have a Cortana on the Windows, or you have Alexa, right? So if you could run an Alexa based device on a Raspberry Pi using this MEMS mic, how great would that be, right? So here on the ESP32 in a future workshop, we will show you how to put TensorFlow, which is your AI based modeling, to understand the difference between yes and no, right? So this has very limited memory, but with a binary decision such as a yes and a no, we'll be able to do a lot of experiments. Say, for example, you want to turn on the light. If you say yes, it turns on the light. If you say no, it turns off the light. So if that you can perform using a particular microcontroller like this, but if you want to port Alexa, you could use Raspberry Pi and use this particular MEMS microphone to to perform the same. So this is a DIY experiment. Please do try to perform this experiment. Like I showed you, this is the connections. You will be getting the codes, but we'd like you to try and write the code for this particular interface. Okay, so that comes to the end of today's session. Let me just go through the contents of what we did today. So we understood in day 2 of this particular workshop as to what are servers and what are the types of servers. We went into an application server, we went into a computing server, and we went into a mail server. Then we did a socket programming where you saw over a packet sender, which was a UDP packet sender. It sent data from my computer into the ESP32, and you could read and parse that message and perform a particular activity accordingly. Then we saw the Thingsboard UI, which is a graphical user interface, and you saw how you could use widgets to visualize your applications in your particular projects. And then we saw over-the-air programming, where there was a web server which was running on this ESP32, where I could access this web server and update the firmware through a binary file into this particular device. And the last one was a DIY experiment that we would like you, we've told you the hardware connections, but we'd like you to do the experiment on your own. Okay, so this comes to the end of day 2 session. I'm open. I think we had a few good questions coming in. Please shoot your questions. I'm here to answer them. If you have any clarifications, please do shoot in your message. Yeah, I think let me take one of the previous questions which was there. Take Abhay Nayak, sir, for TCP IP communication, the ESP32 needs to be connected to the router and the PC also be connected to the same router. Yes, because I'm connected through the internet and doing this particular activity, it is connected to the same router. But if you have a single point access point, you could essentially connect. Why this happens is because you need to get an IP address. If you are connected in 2 different networks, you would need to port forward that particular data into this particular router. It needs to, I mean, 2 different networks also need to be connected. So that would make it a little difficult to do at this moment. But if you are connected in the same access point or the same router, ESP32 and the PC should be connected to the same place for the UDP or the TCP IP to happen. Yeah, if you have any more questions, please do shoot in with your questions. Yeah, Piyush has asked a question saying that can we do these experiments with the ESP8266? Yes, the libraries will be a little different for the ESP8266, but most of these experiments have been done through Wi-Fi itself. So you could use ESP8266. I have not tried the OTA experiment. Maybe if you have the ESP8266, it's nice that if you could try the OTA experiment on the ESP8266 and let me know tomorrow. But definitely you can do these experiments on the ESP8266 as well, or the Node MCU as such. Yeah, anyone else has any questions, or if you want me to go through and very specific parts of what we did today, please do let me know so that we can clear our doubts. Or if you have any questions related to projects that you are doing, you need not share your project, but if you have some doubts of how to select, what is the protocol to be used, or what is the kind of server allocations that we could do, please do put in a message over here. So by the meaning of server, I have just gone into basically what are the servers which are feasible on a microcontroller platform. There are servers, the AWS server, which you could essentially use, but I'm not going into that. I'm very specifically going into only the servers which can be put on the ESP32 chip. Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a question from Aviral Kumar Goyal. Can you just give a brief about remote processing on mobile without internet using Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, etc.? Okay, can you be a little more specific on remote processing? What would remote processing mean be on a mobile phone? So say you're asking about an Android application which would do this particular activity.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah, okay. So essentially, you could build in Android applications using Android Studio. This has the capability of connecting it to Wi-Fi. So like I showed you, there is examples of a web server which is connected to a router and your phone also being connected to the router. I understand that it is connected to through the router, but there are examples in Arduino. Okay, so you could go to examples over here. Okay, go to ESP32 and go to Wi-Fi, and you could actually create an access point over here. So let me just show you an access point. So what your router is essentially your access point, right? So you're accessing this router to get connected to the internet. But what if I had an access point on this particular device? So this is a Wi-Fi access point on an ESP32. Right? So let me create an access point with the name. I can't give the name Vinay because my router is the same name. Let me give you TQB workshop and my password is TQB1234. Okay, so I'm through this example over here, I'm actually creating an access point on this particular device, which is your ESP32. So without using internet, you're able to connect to it through Wi-Fi. Okay, so let me just, I think this also has a HTML page which is connected to it. So it will be easy for us to see. Okay, let me connect my phone to it so that my internet does not go out.
Sir, in this case, can we use a camera to send images to mobile?
Yeah, exactly. You could use that. So essentially, you can have an access point. Let me just program this. So instead of just a second. Yeah, so instead of me controlling the LED built in over here, if you had the ESP cam, I think tomorrow we will be doing the example of an ESP cam, right? So in that ESP cam, you can create a access point on this particular device and send all the data to this particular device. So without using internet. So it is possible in Wi-Fi. You can stream the data in Wi-Fi. In Bluetooth, it needs a bit of development because the development needs to happen accordingly. Yeah.
So, sir, Wi-Fi is more battery consuming. Should we prefer Bluetooth instead?
Bluetooth, I mean, it's possible to connect, what do you say? It's possible to create a Bluetooth streaming device, but Bluetooth, like I told you, I think in yesterday's discussions, we had that saying that streaming would be a little difficult in Bluetooth unless you write very low level codes because you're having access only to this Arduino at this moment. I'm not saying it's not possible. If you go into your IDF, which is your development framework, which is by Espressif IDF, for developing this where you program it in Lua, it is very much possible, right? So you need to go to a high level program where you need to write in better code or more optimized code so that your packets that you're sending might be lower than what you're sending in Wi-Fi, but you could use Bluetooth to communicate. So it is possible to do cameras not streaming. Maybe, I mean, you could stream it, but at a very low frame rate compared to Wi-Fi. So, I mean, do you have any specific questions? Why? I mean, what is the kind of application that you are looking into is the question.
Yes, sir. So basically what we are trying to do is creating a smart stick for visually impaired. So we plan to use an ESP32 cam and send the live video feed to the mobile phone, and mobile phone will run all the Android application will run all the ML models and tell the user what kind of objects there are. So this is what we are thinking currently.
Okay. So what you could do is essentially you could use Bluetooth, but yeah, I could if you could communicate through your Thinkubator managers like Sahan, if you could get in touch with us separately, we would help you on how you can develop it over Bluetooth. It is possible to develop over Bluetooth, but it is a little time consuming than what we can do it in a workshop like this.
And if we take the Wi-Fi route, it can be done immediately.
Yeah. So essentially, when you have to prove a concept, always use the easier way. So Wi-Fi or Bluetooth is just a change of protocol. You have someone write the code which changes from Bluetooth to Wi-Fi. That's about it. But your application of using this camera to process, that is the uniqueness of your project. So don't worry about power consumption now. You could always say that I will use this over Bluetooth, but focus on building your ML applications on your mobile phone, which would make object recognition much easier. So Wi-Fi should not be your target unless you're already at a stage where you're trying to sell this device, right? Are you at a stage where you are building your MVP or you're trying to prove your concept?
Sir, we proved our concept with the help of an Android application only. And that was done a few months before. Currently, we are building the prototype.
Okay, so best is to go with Wi-Fi for now, unless you have good knowledge on the ESP framework, because you can't build it in Arduino. You need to build it in something called IDF, which is your development framework, like how you build it in Eclipse or you have your own development frameworks, right? So you would need to go into a high-level framework for this particular development. So first, try to do it over Wi-Fi. You get the concepts, you get all the information correctly, then it would just be a change of protocol from Wi-Fi to Bluetooth.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Yeah. Thank you very much.
No problem. Yeah, Aviral, where are you from? Which Thinkubator are you from?
Sir, I'm from Goa, BITS Pilani Goa campus.
Okay, that's great. Sure. So you could always connect to us if you require help. We could share information on how to move forward and what would be the simplest way to do it.
Okay,
yeah, maybe we can connect offline also, right?
Yeah, exactly. So you could connect offline for specific questions like this. Yeah.
Sure. Please connect with me so that like we can take it forward.
Sure, sir. Sure.
Yeah. So moving on to the next question, I think Swati has asked a question. Can we connect ESP32 to AWS S3 bucket via API gateway or a server necessary to store things or other data types? Definitely you can connect to your AWS S3 bucket. It's only your API calls. So if you understand where to put in your API calls over here, like how you are essentially connecting to ThingsBoard, what you saw today. Similarly, you could connect to AWS. There are a few examples. Do send in an email to our email address and we will share you some examples of what we've done. Yeah, so definitely you can connect it. You can connect your ESP32 to AWS. That's not a problem. Abhishek has asked a question where you're working on a project which has to update firmware over serial port. Can you tell me which can parse a code which is in .srec format, which is received and stored over serial port? I would need to do some study on this particular activity, Abhishek. I do not have an answer at this moment, but definitely I will note down this particular point and will send you an email on the same. So let me just copy this question. Do send in your email to or connect to Sahan. We will find out and I will let you know about this particular question. Thank you. Yeah. So anyone else has any other questions? So we were just seeing what is an access point on the ESP32. Let me just open up my mobile phone and go to Wi-Fi. I have my access point, which is the ESP which has come up. Okay, so there is an access point which is being created, and I am also connected to this particular device. On my browser, let me just connect with the IP address 192.168.4.1. Okay, so I have a connection which I have already connected. I think I cannot show it to you on the computer because if I connect to a device without the internet, what will happen is that our WebEx meeting will get disconnected. So let me turn on the light of this. So I'm not using any internet. It says no internet connection over here, and I'm able to turn on and turn off the LED through the access point over here. Right? So let me turn it on again. Right? So this is how you could use an access point on the ESP32 without having to connect to the internet as well. Okay. So that was the experiment on Wi-Fi access point. Yeah, so if anyone else has any other questions, we could take these questions now. So I think if we do not have any more questions going further, we'll anyway be here for some more time. But thank you for attending today's webinar. I hope you have got some insights or got some ideas on how you want to implement your ideas. Please understand that the Thinkubator community is a very open community and we are all learning. We are trying to build products of our own. And I hope you have understood that it is not that you need to build it with 100% specification, but you would need to prove your concept first before going deeper into the picture. So use something which is easy to do today. And if you could finish proving a concept today, that would be the best before you could jump into something which is more difficult. So say, for example, I would like to tell you a small story over here where for my medical devices company, we were building a device which would measure how a person walks, right? So here, when we were actually building this device of how the person walks, we were trying to put in a lot of data. We were trying to put in a server. We were trying to put in a data stream. We were trying to get information at the rate of maybe 1,000 samples per second, right? So that wasn't actually possible, and we were trying that for almost 2 months. Then we realized that we do not have a product. If anyone asks us what we're doing, we do not have something actually to be shown. So we moved that down. We said, let's just do 100 samples per second. Why do you want 1,000 samples per second? Prove the concept, move further, build more capacity as a team, get some funding, and then build your actual application, right? So that's the technology should never limit your idea from being an idea to being a prototype, right? So please feel free to discuss any questions that you have. Um, do email us. My email ID is vs@li2.in, or please do connect to Sahan over here through email, and we could get in touch. There is a question from Abhishek also to be answered. I will do the same over email. Yeah. So if we do not have any more questions, I think thank you for attending this workshop. Sahan, do you have any closing comments?
Yeah, so thanks everyone. So we have day 3 also tomorrow. So yeah, so we'll get back tomorrow also, like to continue where we have left. Okay. So if you have any doubt, or like you can also offline, like you can connect with us offline. Like we will take it to Vinay also, those doubts and all. And like if you are like doing in your project track doing any hardware specific project, or like you want to try out ESP32 and all, do reach to us. Like you can buy the components and you can buy the product and all. We'll reimburse you, and so that like you can do this hands-on experiment with the there itself. Okay, and then like you can try it out, like whatever you have learned in this workshop. So I hope, so I think like we can end the session, right? Or you told like there is one more question. Vinay?
Yeah, I think there was one question that I will come back to by Abhishek, but everything else is, I think, answered. We do not have any more questions over here. So we could close the session.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Vinay. Thanks.
Yeah,
thanks all. Thanks. So we will meet tomorrow.
Yeah, we have the third day tomorrow on ESP-CAM. It will be an interesting session. Please do attend in full strength as we have today. Please do attend the session so that we can understand more in depth of video applications in our projects. Okay. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for coming in today. See you guys tomorrow.
Thanks. Thanks. Bye. See you. Bye.